What's going on, growers? It's James Prigioni coming to you live from Jersey. Today, I want to share with you how to cheaply fill a deep raised bed that will grow a lot of food and save you money. Let's go! Right here is the bed that we're going to be working on today. We're going to be filling up. And this bed I built last fall, and I built it in a terrace fashion, as you can see, for a couple of reasons. The first reason is because that is the south that way. So my lower, shorter plants are going to be right here. Some of my lettuces and my leafy greens. And then up here is going to be some other plants. But I don't want those leafy greens and that other stuff to shade the plants on the north side. So that's why we have this terrace. Another reason that I did the terrace was because underneath this bed is actually a concrete slab. So as I move some of these wood chips aside and stuff, you'll notice that this is a concrete slab right here. So in this shorter section, we only have about 10 inches because that's the depth of this bed right here to grow some of our stuff into. So we can grow some shallow rooted plants like lettuces and leafy greens, some Asian greens, stuff like that. And then in this higher section, it's going to be much deeper where we can grow our deeper rooted plants. What we're not going to be doing is filling up this section at the bottom with good soil like I did in the front here. The reason I'm not going to be doing that is because the plants I'm going to be putting in the ground back here, they're only going to need about, say, 12 inches to about 18 inches of good soil. So I don't want to waste good soil at the bottom here if it's not completely necessary for what we're planting. Let's move over to this raised bed right here. And I put this in a couple years ago, this raised bed. I built it out of 2x10s. So when I put it in, I made my own soil and I put in about 10 inches of good soil because that's the depth of this bed. As you come in, you'll notice a lot of these plants in here are growing real well. The brassicas, they're excelling. And underneath this, we just have native soil. So the plants have about a foot to grow. And then if they want, they could root into that native soil a little bit. And even though that native soil isn't super high quality soil, like the stuff I built at top, it still works well. That's what we want to do in that deep raised bed. We want to create the same scenario where we have about 12 inches to 1.5 feet of good soil. Then underneath that, we have some organic matter that the roots can go into and root into if they want to, but it doesn't cost us anything. One thing we need to take into account is that this bed that we're filling up, it's on a concrete slab, like I mentioned earlier. So when it rains, we don't want this thing to just fill up like a bucket would and just hold all that excess water and allow it to sit there. We want to make sure it drains. That's why I raised the bed up a bit, so we have some area where the water can drain out, because this concrete slab is not level, so it leaves sections where it can drain. I want to make sure that it's not too high and that I'm not draining all the soil out. So when I water the garden, I don't want the soil to be pushing out the bottom. So to prevent this, I put some 1/4-inch hardware cloth in. You can see right here, there's a hole. And then I covered that with landscape fabric. That's just to make like a natural basin that can hold some of the soil, but it will still drain the water. Now, I'm going to start filling up my bed with some organic matter that'll fill the space up. And to do that, I'm going to use some old rotting logs and sticks. And the logs and stick work great for this, especially when they're rotting like this one is. And they work great because what we're going to do is just, like I said, fill this space up. But the logs, over time, they'll start to break down and become porous, so they'll be able to hold and retain some moisture. But they can also release the moisture when they need to too. So it works great to make it so we don't have any anaerobic bacteria or any anaerobic conditions going on down there, because that's the last thing that we want and what we're trying to prevent. Anaerobic, which means without oxygen. So our roots need oxygen to grow. So we want to make sure that there's a good amount of oxygen down here. So putting these logs in and stuff will create a scenario where we can get help with drainage and also help with some water retention. So we're going to start putting these logs in at the base down here. I don't want them coming up too high, but as you notice, they're only about 3 or 4 inches up here. So this will be, I'll just line the base like this, not too tight, with the logs, and then we'll start moving some sticks up above that. Most of the big logs are in. That looks pretty good. Let's start getting some of these sticks in. And these small sticks are gonna help for some of the drainage actually. So we'll put this in so that it doesn't get too dense at the bottom, because if we were to just pack the bottom with some native soil or something, that could get really dense, and then that really wouldn't be able to get rid of some of the moisture and drain it, and then we'll be back in the scenario where it's anaerobic. That's really what we're trying to avoid in these deep beds, because when you don't have oxygen, it'll just slowly rot out all your roots and everything. Let's keep getting these sticks in. And remember, we want about 12 inches at least of good soil. And we need a buffer of about 6 inches at least of that native soil and compost. Okay, that looks pretty good. as you come down here, notice we got a good amount of sticks in here, and that's just a lot of space we already saved. So this is all space we're saving. We're not having to pay for good soil in here. So this is definitely going to help us save a good amount of money, and we're still going to grow excellent food in here. What we don't want to do next though is just put our good soil on top. We need that buffer of some natural organic material. We're going to get some compost and some native soil and some stuff from the chicken pen. Now we're going to move into the chicken pen and grab some of this organic matter, some old compost and stuff. I had a compost pile going, but I kind of let the chickens get at it and they ripped it apart. So this is going to be some good organic matter to use. We don't want to be using a lot of green materials when we do this because we don't want to build a compost pile underneath our raised bed. So you could put some greens and stuff, but I suggest you focus more on brown materials. And you could use some leaves if you want, but just make sure you're not using too many leaves that they mat up. They mat things up too much and then prevent the water from moving through. So all this is just like extra, but we're going to use this to fill the space. It's going to be beautiful. It's got all of our organic matter. Let's start loading it into the bed now. And you could use native soil for this if you want, but I'm just going to use this extra stuff that I have. So what we're doing here is we're filling up a lot of that space. We don't want a lot of huge air gaps. Yes, the roots do need oxygen to grow, but we don't want a lot of air gaps because then our soil is going to sink down. And as I'm filling this up, I want to get in there and kind of, push down some of the soil and compost because, like I mentioned, I don't want that sinkage that will happen if there's a lot of airspace. This thing can sink a decent amount. It's going to sink a little over time, but we want to minimize that if we can. So we're gonna get some more soil and fill it up. I'm gonna fill the buffer soil, all this extra stuff, to about here, maybe a little higher. This way we have at least 10 inches of good soil that I can add in, and it'll be very similar to the bed that I just showed you before, where we're growing great food. And the bed right behind me here. This is the birdies raised bed I put in. We're gonna be building the same soil after I have all this of the filler put in. We're gonna be building the same soil on top that I built in here. So I'm gonna show you how I built that, and it's growing incredibly well so far. Let's get this in. It's starting to look good. We're almost to the right height. Now I'm just gonna compress it down a little more, make sure we're filling some of that space. And I'm actually gonna water it in a little bit. And I'm gonna do that to, again, have some of the space get filled by the soil and dirt as it moves down. But I'm also going to do this to supercharge the wood a little bit. So I want that wood to be a little wet so it can start breaking down, and then the fungus will come and start eating at the wood and destroying it. I don't want to make this super wet and super soggy though. So we're just going to wet it down a little bit. We're almost to the right height here. The great thing about using this organic matter here is over time this organic matter is just going to break down and turn into great soil. This is going to be bringing a lot of worms in. The worms will be going up and down through the soil, going deeper as it gets colder out, breaking down some of the stuff at the bottom. I'd say that's pretty perfect. So now we're going to build this high quality soil for the top 10 or 12 inches. And then if the plants want to grow just a little deeper, the roots want to go deeper, they can go into this beautiful compost or native soil or whatever you have down here. It's not just going to grow into wood. We want to make sure we have this buffer because roots just aren't going to grow into the center of a solid piece of wood if it's not like very broken down. So we want to make sure we give the roots the ability to find something else to tap into. Now we're ready to start building our soil that we're going to fill in the top 10 or 12 inches. So I like to build my own soil. I find it to be cheaper, more fun, and I just love doing it. So if you don't want to build your own soil, you could just pick up some good organic raised bed mix. It's going to be a little more expensive and it's not going to be customizable to a particular plant like how I like to do it, but it still works great. So I'm going to build my soil. I'm not going to show you exactly how I do it, but if you want a more detailed view of the specific ingredients that I like to use, then I'll do a video on that. But today I'm just going to show you a basic mixture where we can start with just 1/3 compost like I have here. And then 1/3, you can either use some cocoa coir like I have right here. This was a cocoa brick. I just wet it yesterday and then just broke it apart. And you can use 1/3 cocoa or 1/3 peat moss. And then 1/3 perlite or vermiculite. So I've got some vermiculite here. So I'm gonna put in about 1/3 vermiculite. That's a good base start. And again, you can either use vermiculite or perlite, and you can use cocoa or peat moss, but that's a good start. I'm gonna get it all mixed up and get my own specific mix going, and then I'm gonna start putting it in. There we go. This is looking nice and mixed. I like what I see. Now let's start getting it into the bed. I'm gonna start putting this in, and another reason I love making my soil is like you can customize it to whatever environment, whatever plants you're growing. So if you live in a super hot climate, you may want some better water retention. So you may want to add some more cocoa coir or something. So whatever you want to use the soil for, you can customize to it. That's why one of the reasons I love building my own. So we're just going to keep adding this in. And you'll notice underneath, I don't have a lot of greens. Again, I don't want to make a compost pile underneath my soil, or that will just heat up and burn a lot of my roots. So we're going to keep loading this in. Get a nice 10 inches of good soil. Just gonna finish putting the soil in. And the compost that I use for this, I get for $45 for a cubic yard. At the big box store like Lowe's, they sell 1 cubic foot for $5.28. So there's 27 cubic feet in a cubic yard. And if I was to get 1 cubic yard, which costs me $45 in compost, if I was to get that from Lowe's, it'd be like $140. So obviously I'm not using a whole cubic yard of compost in here, but it is a good saving if you want to order some of your own compost to build your own soil. And to me, it's one of the most fun things. So we'll keep getting this filled up. There we go, I got all that soil in. I think I do need just another, maybe 3 inches of soil. So I'll mix up another batch and then just do the same exact thing. But what I want to do is just also water this in a little bit. I like to do to make sure I'm not getting any pooling, make sure I'm getting good drainage. And I also like to fill this with water, let it sit for a little while so I can test the weight of the soil. I don't want it to be really heavy and really dense, or it's going to be tough for the roots to move through. If it's really dense and really heavy, then I'll add a little more cocoa coir. And you'll notice I put some perlite in here too to help with the drainage. There we go, it's watered in. It's accepting the water well. Now I'm just gonna dig in a little bit to make sure that the soil is not too heavy or too dense. So when I lift this up, it's pretty light, even though it's not super saturated. I don't want soil that's really heavy or really dense or hard to move, because if it's hard to move, it's gonna be hard for the roots to move it too. So that looks beautiful like that. I'll mix up a little more soil, fill it up, and then it's ready to plant into. Saved a good amount of money by not using any good soil for the bottom half of this. So again, basically about half the soil we had to use, and we're still going to be able to grow a lot of food. And we'll come back in a couple of weeks, we'll check this out, we'll see how much stuff is growing here and how much actually we've been able to utilize this section. And in the front here, you'll notice we've got a little gap. I'm just going to fill that with soil. I'll just backfill that here. I'm going to make some more soil, same stuff I made at the top, and just we'll fill it in. So we'll be able to grow a lot of food in this section, even though we're on a concrete slab here, and we don't have to use a lot of soil to fill this bed up. Before I let you go, I wanted to talk about something, and it's Hugelkultur. A lot of you will probably ask, are you building a Hugelkultur bed? I didn't do that specifically here because I think it's some great advantage. I think Hugelkultur works good in the right scenario, and it got popular for a while. I had a big video on it, or I had a video on it that did well on my channel, and I actually ended up taking that down because I don't believe that it's necessary really almost ever. The reason that Sepp Holzer had so much success with the Hugelkultur, and he's the one who kind of started it, was because he was on a very steep slope in the Swiss Alps. So what he did was he cut down a lot of trees that he had locally, laid them on the ground, and then built up soil around it. This way, on a deep slope, when the water came down, it would hit against the hugel beds, and then the water would sink in. So he did it because it was necessary for his particular situation. He didn't do it because it's amazing to grow food in wood. It doesn't work that great. it's good as a space filler like I did here, and eventually it will break down to organic matter, but I didn't specifically put wood in here to help with the growth. I just did it to fill the space. So I don't think Hugelkultur is great for many scenarios, but in some particular situations, it does work. That's today's video, growers. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. The rain is starting to come down. It's actually awesome. Me and Tucker are so happy about it because it's gonna water all of our plants in, and it's gonna also water that bed in. We hope you got something out of the video, and if you're gonna put a deep raised bed in, I hope you don't waste money by just filling the bottom if it's not necessary with good soil, when you could just fill it with some wood and some organic matter. So if you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share it with your friends. Don't forget to check out the merch down low. And remember, whenever you're on Amazon, start your shopping with our Amazon affiliate link. I also wanted to thank one of the new channel members, or not new, but you've been a channel member for a little bit, Sam Love. Thank you for your continued support. Me and Tucker appreciate it a lot, and for being part of Team Grow. And me and Tucker are gonna be consistently out here. He's trying to get your attention by starting to, pull out his stick and stuff, because he wants to be on camera, because he's really, this guy's the star of the show. But we'll be back at you again real soon. If you did enjoy the video though, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. James and Tuck will be back at you real soon. We